Maya Johnson checked the clock on her dashboard and sighed deeply. She was already running 15 minutes late for her evening shift at Tony's diner, and her boss wasn't the type to show much patience. The afternoon sun was starting to set as she drove down Highway 85, thinking about all the things she needed to get done before picking up her daughter Zoe from her neighbor's house. Life had been tough for Maya ever since her husband left 3 years ago. She worked at Henderson's auto shop during the day, getting her hands dirty fixing cars and trucks. Then every evening she would rush across town to serve coffee and burgers at the diner until midnight. It wasn't easy, but every dollar she earned went toward giving Zoe a better future. As Maya rounded the bend near Miller's Creek Bridge, she noticed something unusual ahead. A shiny black Mercedes was pulled over on the side of the road with its hood up. White steam was pouring out like a small cloud, and she could see a man in an expensive suit walking back and forth beside the car. He was holding his phone up to his ear, and even from a distance Maya could tell he was upset. For a moment Maya thought about just driving past. After all, she had her own problems to worry about. Her old Honda Civic was making strange noises that morning, and she couldn't afford to get it fixed right now. Plus, she was already late for work, and Tony had warned her last week about being on time. But something made her slow down and pull over. Maybe it was the way her father used to always stop to help strangers when she was little. He would say, "Maya, when someone needs help and you can give it, you help them. That's just how good people act." Her father had been gone for 5 years now, but his words still echoed in her mind every day. Maya parked her Honda behind the Mercedes and walked toward the stranded driver. The man looked to be in his 30s with short dark hair and a worried expression on his face. His suit probably cost more than Maya made in 2 months, and his leather shoes looked like they had never touched dirt before today. "Excuse me, sir," Maya called out as she approached. "I'm a mechanic at Henderson's auto shop. Maybe I can help you out?" The man turned toward her, and Maya could see doubt in his eyes. He looked at her work clothes, her oil-stained hands, and her old car, parked behind his expensive Mercedes. For a second, Maya thought he might just wave her away and tell her he was fine. "I'm David Sterling," he said, extending his hand. "I appreciate the offer, but I've already called my mechanic. He should be here soon." Maya noticed that David kept checking his expensive watch every few seconds. The worry lines on his face were getting deeper, and she could tell this wasn't just about a broken car. "How soon is soon?" Maya asked. "Because I can see you're in a hurry, and I might be able to get you back on the road faster than waiting for a tow truck." David ran his hand through his hair and looked at his phone again. "The mechanic said it could be an hour or more. I have the most important meeting of my life in 45 minutes downtown. If I miss it, I could lose everything I've worked for." Maya could hear the desperation in his voice. She understood what it felt like to have everything riding on one moment, one chance that could change your whole life. "Let me take a look," she said. "What's the worst that could happen?" David stepped back as Maya approached the car. She could smell the sweet scent of coolant mixing with the hot metal of the engine. Steam was still rising from under the hood, and Maya could already guess what the problem might be. "When did you first notice the steam?" she asked, leaning over to examine the engine. "About 10 minutes ago," David replied. The temperature gauge started climbing, and then suddenly there was all this white smoke. Maya nodded and carefully touched different parts of the engine, checking for the source of the leak. Her hands moved with the confidence of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. She traced the coolant lines and quickly found what she was looking for. "Found it," she said, pointing to a split in one of the rubber hoses. "Your upper radiator hose has a tear. That's why you're losing coolant and overheating." David looked at the damaged hose and then back at Maya. "Can you fix it?" "I can do a temporary repair that will get you to your meeting and then to a proper mechanic," Maya said. "I always keep an emergency kit in my trunk for situations like this." She walked back to her Honda and opened the trunk. Inside was a small toolbox, some spare hoses, clamps, and a roll of heavy-duty tape. Maya had learned to always be prepared. After being stranded herself a few years back with Zoe in the car, as Maya gathered her tools, David watched her with growing amazement. Here was this woman who didn't know him from anyone, stopping her own busy day to help a complete stranger. He could see from her clothes and her car that she wasn't wealthy, yet she was offering her time and skills without asking for anything in return. "You really don't have to do this," David said as Maya returned with her tools. "I can pay you whatever you think is fair." Maya shook her head as she began working on the hose. "My daddy always taught me that helping folks isn't about money. It's about doing what's right." While Maya worked, David found himself curious about this woman who had stopped to help him. "Do you have family?" he asked. "I have a daughter," Maya said, her face lighting up with pride. "Her name is Zoe, and she's 8 years old. Smartest little girl you ever met. She wants to be an engineer when she grows up." "That's wonderful," David said. "Engineering is a great field. There's so much opportunity there." Maya smiled as she tightened a clamp around the repaired hose. "That's what I keep telling her. I'm saving up to make sure she can go to college someday. Want her to have all the chances I never had." David was quiet for a moment, thinking about his own childhood. His mother had worked 3 jobs to support him and his sister after their father died. He remembered how hard she worked, how tired she always was, and how she never complained about the sacrifices she made for her children. "Where do you work besides the auto shop?" David asked. "Tony's Diner on 5th Street, Maya replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I work there evenings and weekends. Tips aren't much, but every little bit helps with Zoe's education fund." David watched as Maya carefully checked her repair work. She tested the connection, made sure everything was tight, and then stepped back to look at the whole engine again. "You know," Maya said, "your car is making a slight whining sound from the alternator. You might want to have that checked soon. It's not urgent, but you don't want to get stuck with a dead battery." David was impressed by her attention to detail. "How did you learn so much about cars?" "My daddy was a mechanic," Maya explained. "He started teaching me when I was 12 years old. Said every person should know how to take care of their own car. After he passed, I got the job at Henderson's. Been there for 6 years now." Maya closed the hood and wiped her hands on a rag. "That should hold you for today, but you need to get that hose properly replaced as soon as possible, and make sure to check your coolant level when you get where you're going." David looked at his watch and realized he might actually make it to his meeting on time. "I can't believe you did this. You saved my entire business deal." "Just glad I could help," Maya said with a genuine smile. "Drive careful now." As Maya turned to walk back to her car, David noticed something that made him stop breathing for a moment. On Maya's left hand was a ring that looked familiar. Very familiar. It was a simple silver band with 3 small diamonds arranged in a triangle pattern. The design was unusual, not something you would see in most jewelry stores. David's heart started beating faster as he stared at the ring. It couldn't be possible. After all these years, after all the searching his family had done, could this really be happening? "Wait," David called out, his voice shaking slightly. "That ring you're wearing, where did you get it?" Maya looked down at her hand and touched the ring with her thumb. It was something she did when she was nervous or thinking about her grandmother. "This old thing? It was my grandmother's. She left it to me when she passed away 5 years ago." David's mind was racing. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands and started scrolling through his photos. His heart was pounding as he searched for the picture he knew was there somewhere. "Can you tell me more about your grandmother?" David asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Maya looked at him strangely, wondering why this man was so interested in her family history. Her name was Ruth Johnson. She was the strongest woman I ever knew. Raised my daddy all by herself back when that wasn't easy for a woman to do. David found the photo he was looking for and stared at it for a long moment. His hands were shaking. As he turned the phone toward Maya, "Was this your grandmother?" he asked quietly. Maya looked at the old black and white photograph on David's phone and gasped. It was definitely her grandmother, but she looked younger than Maya had ever seen her. She was wearing the same ring that Maya now wore, and she was smiling in a way that Maya had rarely seen in her own family photos. "How do you have a picture of my grandmother?" Maya asked, confusion and worry mixing in her voice. David took a deep breath knowing that what he was about to say would change both of their lives forever. Maya stared at the photograph on David's phone, her mind trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The young woman in the picture was definitely her grandmother, Ruth, but she looked so different from the tired, weathered woman Maya remembered from her childhood. In this photo, Ruth's eyes were bright and full of hope, and she was wearing a beautiful dress that Maya had never seen before. "I don't understand," Maya said slowly. "How do you have this picture? And why does my grandmother look so happy?" David's hands were still shaking as he put his phone away. He looked around at the highway with cars rushing past them and realized this wasn't the right place for the conversation they needed to have. But he also knew he couldn't just drive away without explaining. "This is going to sound crazy," David began, "but I think our families are connected in a way that neither of us knew about. That ring you're wearing and this photograph, they're both part of a story that my family has been trying to piece together for over 60 years. Maya touched her ring again, a habit she'd had since childhood. Whenever she felt nervous or confused, she would twist the ring around her finger. Her grandmother had done the same thing, she remembered. My grandmother never talked much about the past, Maya said. She would get sad whenever I asked about my grandfather or about her life before. She had my daddy. She always said some stories were too painful to tell." David nodded slowly. "I think I might know why she felt that way. But before I explain everything, can I ask you something? Do you have time to sit down somewhere and talk?" "I know you said you were late for work, but this is really important." Maya looked at her watch and realized she was now almost 30 minutes late for her shift at the diner. Tony was going to be angry, but something in David's voice told her this conversation couldn't wait. "There's a coffee shop about 5 minutes from here," Maya said. "Benny's Place, right off exit 12. Do you know it?" "I'll follow you there," David said. "And Maya, thank you. I know this is strange, but I think this meeting was meant to happen." The drive to Benny's Place gave Maya time to think. Her grandmother, Ruth, had always been mysterious about her past. She had raised Maya's father, Thomas, as a single mother, working as a cleaning lady and taking in laundry to make ends meet. Ruth had been proud but poor, and she'd always told Maya that the ring was the only valuable thing she owned. "This ring is special," Ruth used to say. "It was given to me by someone who loved me very much. Someday when you're older, maybe I'll tell you the whole story." But Ruth had died before ever telling that story, and Maya had always wondered about the mystery behind the simple silver ring with its 3 small diamonds. Benny's Place was a small diner that had been serving coffee and pie to truck drivers and travelers for 40 years. Maya chose a quiet booth in the back corner, away from the other customers. David slid into the seat across from her, looking nervous but determined. "Can I get you folks anything?" asked Betty, the waitress who had worked at Benny's longer than anyone could remember. "2 coffees, please," David said, "and maybe some pie if you have any." "Apple or cherry?" Betty asked. "Apple," Maya said, even though she wasn't really hungry. Her stomach was too full of butterflies to think about food. After Betty walked away, David leaned forward and began to speak in a quiet voice. "My grandfather's name was Thomas Sterling. He started Sterling Industries back in 1962 with just a small loan and a big dream. The company grew quickly, and by the late 1960s he was one of the most successful businessmen in the state." Maya listened carefully, wondering where this story was leading. "But my grandfather wasn't just focused on business," David continued. "He was also a good man who treated his employees well. One of the people who worked for his family was a young woman named Ruth. She cleaned the house and helped take care of my father when he was little." Maya's heart started beating faster. "Ruth was my grandmother's name." "I know," David said softly. "Ruth Johnson was 22 years old when she started working for my family. My grandfather was 25, and he had just gotten divorced from his first wife. The marriage had been arranged by their families, and it was never a happy one." Betty returned with their coffee and pie, but neither Maya nor David touched the food. They were both too focused on the story that was unfolding between them. "My grandfather and Ruth fell in love," David said. "It wasn't something either of them planned. It just happened slowly, over months of working together and talking together. Ruth was smart and funny and kind, and my grandfather had never met anyone like her. Maya could feel tears starting to form in her eyes. She had always wondered why her grandmother sometimes looked so sad, especially when she was looking at old photographs or listening to certain songs on the radio. But this was 1968, David continued. Interracial relationships weren't accepted back then, especially not between a wealthy white businessman and his African-American employee. My grandfather knew that if people found out about their relationship, it could ruin both of their lives. So what happened? Maya asked, even though part of her already knew the answer would be heartbreaking. They kept their relationship secret for almost 2 years, David said. My grandfather bought Ruth that ring as a promise ring. He wanted to marry her, but he knew they would have to wait until society changed, or until they could move somewhere more accepting. David pulled out his phone again and showed Maya another photograph. This one showed a young man who looked like an older version of David, standing next to Ruth in front of a small house. "That's my grandfather and your grandmother," David said. This picture was taken in 1969, just a few months before everything changed. Changed how? Maya asked. Ruth got pregnant, David said simply. She was scared to tell my grandfather at first, but when she did, he was thrilled. He started making plans to move them both to California, where they could live as a family without so much judgment. Maya's coffee was getting cold, but she couldn't think about anything except the story David was telling. This was the missing piece of her family's history, the story her grandmother had never been able to share. But before they could leave, David continued, my grandfather's business partners found out about the relationship. They gave him an ultimatum: end things with Ruth immediately or they would destroy his company and ruin his reputation. And he chose his business over my grandmother, Maya said, feeling angry on behalf of a woman she had never known as a young person. No, David said quickly. That's not what happened. My grandfather chose Ruth. He told his partners he was leaving the company and moving to California. He was willing to give up everything for her. Maya looked confused. Then why did she leave? David's voice became very quiet. Because Ruth overheard the conversation between my grandfather and his partners. She heard them threatening to destroy not just his business, but also to make sure she never found work anywhere in the state. They said they would make life impossible for her and her baby. So she left to protect him, Maya whispered. She disappeared one night while my grandfather was out of town on business, David said. She left a note saying she was sorry, but she couldn't let him sacrifice his future for her. She said she would always love him, but she had to think about what was best for their child. Maya wiped tears from her eyes with a napkin. And he never found her? He spent years looking, David said. He hired private investigators, placed ads in newspapers all over the country, even offered a reward for information. But Ruth had changed her last name and moved far away. She was smart about covering her tracks. She moved to Georgia, Maya said. That's where my daddy was born and where I grew up. She worked as a cleaning lady there too, and she raised my daddy by herself. David nodded. My grandfather never remarried. He said Ruth was the love of his life, and he couldn't imagine being with anyone else. He kept that photograph of her on his desk until the day he died 10 years ago. Maya looked down at the ring on her finger, seeing it in a completely new way. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry from her grandmother. It was a symbol of a love story that had been interrupted by prejudice and fear. My daddy's name was Thomas, Maya said suddenly. My grandmother named him after your grandfather. I know, David said, smiling through his own tears. My grandfather always hoped that Ruth had named their son after him. It was one of the things that kept him believing he might find them someday. They sat in silence for a few minutes, both thinking about the generations of separation that had kept their families apart. Maya thought about all the struggles her grandmother had faced, raising a child alone in a time when single mothers had very little support. She thought about her father, who had grown up without knowing his real father, and about herself, who had never known she had family beyond her small circle. There's something else, David said finally. Something that makes this meeting even more special than you might realize. Maya looked up at him, wondering what else there could possibly be to this story. Today is the anniversary, David said. 65 years ago today, my grandfather gave that ring to your grandmother and asked her to marry him. Maya stared at him in amazement. Of all the days for her to stop and help a stranger, of all the highways she could have been driving on, she had found David on the exact anniversary of her grandparents' engagement. That can't be a coincidence, Maya said. I don't think it is, David agreed. I think our grandparents would be happy to know that we found each other. Maya sat in the booth at Benny's place, staring at the ring on her finger as if she was seeing it for the first time. The weight of everything David had told her was slowly sinking in. Her grandmother Ruth, the woman who had raised her father and helped raise her, had been part of a love story that spanned decades and changed multiple lives. I need to call my job, Maya said suddenly, reaching for her phone. I'm supposed to be at the diner right now, and Tony is probably wondering where I am. David watched as Maya dialed the number. He could hear the anxiety in her voice as she spoke to her boss, explaining that she had a family emergency and would be late. From the conversation, David could tell that Tony wasn't happy about the situation. I might lose my job over this, Maya said after hanging up. Tony doesn't like it when people don't show up on time. He says there are plenty of other people who want to work at the diner. I'm sorry, David said. This is my fault. If I hadn't broken down on the highway, you wouldn't be in this situation. Maya shook her head. Don't apologize. Some things are more important than a job serving coffee and burgers. Finding out about my family history is definitely one of those things. David looked at his own phone and realized he had missed 17 calls from his business partner. The meeting he was supposed to attend was probably over by now, and the deal he had worked months to arrange was likely gone. Looks like we both have some explaining to do, David said, showing Maya his phone screen. Was that meeting really important? Maya asked. It was supposed to be the biggest deal of my career, David admitted. A contract that would have taken my company to the next level. But honestly, sitting here with you feels more important than any business meeting. Maya studied David's face and saw that he meant what he said. There was something about the way he looked at her that reminded her of the old photographs of her grandmother. It was a look of genuine care and connection that went beyond surface appearances. Can I ask you something? Maya said. When you saw my ring, you looked like you had seen a ghost. Did you know what it was right away? David nodded. My grandfather kept a detailed drawing of that ring in his desk. He had sketched it from memory after Ruth left, hoping that someday it might help him find her. I've seen that drawing hundreds of times over the years. He really never stopped looking for her, did he? Never, David said. Even when he got older and his health started failing, he would still ask me to help him search online. We looked through social media, genealogy websites, anywhere we thought we might find a trace of Ruth or their son. Maya felt a pang of sadness, thinking about all the years her grandmother and David's grandfather had spent apart, both carrying the pain of their separation. My grandmother used to get this faraway look in her eyes sometimes, especially when she heard certain songs on the radio. Now I understand why. What kind of songs? David asked. Old love songs from the 60s, Maya said. Motown music especially. She would stop whatever she was doing and just listen, like she was remembering something beautiful and sad at the same time. David smiled. My grandfather loved Motown too. He said it reminded him of the happiest time in his life. They sat quietly, for a moment, both thinking about the love story that had shaped their families in ways they were only beginning to understand. Betty came by to refill their coffee cups, but neither of them had touched their pie. I keep thinking about my daddy, Maya said. He died 5 years ago, right around the same time as my grandmother. He never knew who his real father was. My grandmother would only tell him that his father was a good man who couldn't be part of their lives. What was your father like? David asked. Maya's face lit up when she talked about her father. He was the kindest man you ever met, just like my grandmother described your grandfather. Daddy would help anyone who needed it, even if it meant he went without something himself. He worked as a mechanic his whole life, and he taught me everything I know about fixing cars. He sounds like he inherited his father's good heart, David said. He did, Maya agreed. And he passed that same spirit on to me. That's why I stopped, to help you today. Daddy always said that when you see someone in trouble, you help them if you can, No questions asked. David was quiet for a moment, thinking about the chain of kindness that had brought them together. If Maya's father hadn't taught her to help strangers, she might have driven right past his broken-down car. If she hadn't inherited her grandmother's generous spirit, they never would have discovered their family connection. "Maya," David said, carefully, "can I show you something else?" He pulled out his phone again and scrolled to a different folder of photographs. These pictures were more recent, showing a large house with beautiful gardens and several expensive cars in the driveway. "This is where I live now," David said. "It's the same house where my grandfather lived when he met your grandmother. The same house where Ruth worked all those years ago." Maya looked at the photos with mixed emotions. The house was beautiful, but it also represented a life that her family had been excluded from for generations. She wondered what her life might have been like if her grandmother and David's grandfather had been able to stay together. "Do you live there alone?" Maya asked. "I do now," David said. "I was married for a few years, but it didn't work out. We didn't have children, which is probably for the best since we weren't happy together." Maya understood that feeling. Her own marriage had ended when her husband decided he didn't want the responsibility of being a father to Zoe. Some people just weren't built for the challenges of family life. "Tell me about Zoe," David said. "She sounds like a special little girl." Maya's whole demeanor changed when she talked about her daughter. "She's everything to me. Smart as a whip and curious about everything. She loves to take things apart, to see how they work just like I did when I was her age. Does she know about cars?" "Oh yes," Maya laughed. "She can change a tire and check the oil. She helps me in the garage sometimes on weekends. But her real dream is to be an engineer. She wants to design bridges and buildings." David was impressed. "Engineering is an excellent field for someone with a mechanical mind. Has she thought about what kind of engineering she wants to study?" "Civil engineering," Maya said proudly. "She checked out every book about bridges from the library, and she's always drawing designs for structures she wants to build someday." "That's wonderful," David said. "A good engineering program can be expensive, but it's worth the investment." Maya's smile faded a little. "That's what I'm working so hard for. Between the auto shop and the diner, I'm saving every penny I can for her college fund. It's not much yet, but I'm hoping to have enough by the time she graduates high school." David could hear the worry in Maya's voice. He knew from his own experience how much a good education cost, and he could tell that Maya was struggling to make ends meet while trying to save for her daughter's future. "Maya," David said slowly, "I hope this doesn't sound inappropriate, but finding you today feels like more than just a coincidence. I've been thinking about what my grandfather would want me to do if I ever found Ruth's family." "What do you mean?" "My grandfather spent his whole life regretting that he couldn't take care of Ruth and their son. He made a lot of money over the years, but he always said it didn't mean anything because he couldn't share it with the people he loved most." Maya shifted, uncomfortably in her seat. She could sense where this conversation was heading, and it made her nervous. She had always been independent, working hard for everything she had, and the idea of accepting help from someone she had just met felt strange. "David, I appreciate what you're saying, but I can't take money from you. We just met a few hours ago." "I understand," David said quickly. "I'm not talking about charity. I'm talking about family. You and Zoe are the only family I have left from my grandfather's side. The money I inherited from him was supposed to go to Ruth and their son originally." Maya twisted her ring around her finger, a nervous habit that David was beginning to recognize. "This is all happening so fast. A few hours ago, I was just a single mom trying to get to work on time. Now you're telling me I have family I never knew about, and that your grandfather left money for people he never found." "I know it's overwhelming," David said. "But think about it this way. Your grandmother Ruth sacrificed her happiness to protect my grandfather's future. She could have stayed and fought for their relationship, but she chose to leave so that he could succeed in business. And because she left, she lived in poverty for the rest of her life," Maya said, feeling a flash of anger at the unfairness of it all. "Exactly," David said. "She sacrificed everything so that my grandfather could build a successful company. In a way, everything I have today exists because of the choice your grandmother made. Don't you think she would have wanted her family to benefit from that sacrifice? Maya looked down at the ring again, thinking about all the years her grandmother had worked multiple jobs to support her family. Ruth had cleaned other people's houses, taken in laundry, and done whatever she could to make sure her son had food and shelter. She had never complained, but Maya could see now that it must have been heartbreaking to live in poverty when the man she loved was building a fortune. What exactly are you suggesting? Maya asked quietly. David leaned forward, his eyes bright with excitement. I'm suggesting that we find a way to honor both of our grandparents by working together. You have skills and knowledge that my company needs, and I have resources that could help secure Zoe's future. What kind of skills are you talking about? Maya, you diagnosed and fixed my car problem in 10 minutes. You saw an issue with my alternator that I didn't even know existed. You clearly understand mechanical systems in a way that most people don't. Maya shrugged. I've been working on cars for most of my life. It's not that special. It is special, David insisted. My company is developing new automotive technologies, but we need people who really understand how cars work in the real world. We need someone who can spot problems and come up with practical solutions. Maya stared at him, not sure if she was hearing him correctly. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership, David said. A chance to be part of something bigger while still doing what you love, and more importantly, a chance to make sure Zoe has every opportunity she deserves. Maya stared at David across the table at Benny's place, trying to process what he had just said. A partnership, not just a job, but a real business partnership with someone she had met only hours ago. It seemed too good to be true, and Maya had learned long ago that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. David, I appreciate what you're trying to do, Maya said carefully. But I work at an auto shop changing oil and fixing brake pads. I don't know anything about running a business or developing new technologies. But you do know about cars, David said. You know how they really work, how they break down, and how to fix them. That's exactly what my company needs right now. Maya shook her head. I can't just leave Henderson's auto shop. Mr. Henderson gave me a job when nobody else would hire a single mom with no college degree. I owe him my loyalty. What if you didn't have to leave right away? David asked. What if we started small, with you consulting for my company on weekends? You could keep your job at Henderson's while we see how things work out. Maya twisted her ring around her finger, thinking about all the implications of what David was suggesting. And what about Zoe? I can't just uproot her life because I met someone who claims to be family. You don't have to uproot anything, David said gently. We can take this as slow as you want. The most important thing is that we found each other. Everything else can be figured out over time. Maya looked at her watch and realized she had been away from work for almost 2 hours. Tony, at the diner, was probably furious, and she might not have a job to go back to. The thought scared her, but somehow she felt calmer than she had in years. Can I ask you something? Maya said. Why is this so important to you? You have your own successful business, your own life. Why do you care about helping me and Zoe? David was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain feelings he was still trying to understand himself. My grandfather spent the last 40 years of his life with a hole in his heart. He had money, success, respect, but he was never truly happy because he lost the love of his life and never knew his son. That's sad, but it's not your fault, Maya said. Maybe not, David agreed. But I inherited everything he built, including the regret he carried. When I saw that ring on your finger today, it felt like the universe was giving me a chance to fix something that had been broken for too long. Maya could hear the sincerity in David's voice, but she was still cautious. She had been disappointed by people before, and she couldn't afford to make decisions based on emotions alone. What exactly would this partnership look like? Maya asked. David's face lit up with excitement. My company is working on a new type of diagnostic system for cars. We can identify problems using computer sensors, but we need someone who understands what those problems mean in the real world. Someone who can tell us not just what's wrong, but how to fix it practically and affordably. That does sound interesting, Maya admitted, but I still don't understand why you'd want me as a partner instead of just hiring me as an employee. Because you're family, David said simply, and because your grandmother's sacrifice helped make my grandfather's success possible. It's only fair that her family should benefit from that success. Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes again. The idea that her grandmother's difficult choice might finally lead to something good for her family was almost too much to hope for. I need to think about this, Maya said, and I need to talk to Zoe. She's smart for her age and she deserves to know what's happening. Of course, David said. Take all the time you need. But Maya, can I ask you to do one thing? What's that? Let me meet Zoe. Not to pressure her or you, but because she's family too. I'd like to know my cousin. Maya smiled at the word cousin. She had never thought about Zoe having extended family beyond Maya herself. The idea that her daughter might have someone else who cared about her future was both exciting and scary. She gets home from school at 3:30, Maya said. Mrs. Patterson next door watches her until I get home from work. You could come by around 4 if you want. David wrote down Maya's address in his phone. I'll be there. And Maya, thank you for giving me this chance. Maya stood up from the booth, suddenly feeling exhausted from all the emotions of the day. I should go try to salvage what's left of my job at the diner. Tony might be willing to let me work the late shift if I explain that I had a family emergency. What? About your car? David asked. You mentioned it was making strange noises. I'll deal with it later, Maya said. Right now I need to focus on keeping the job I already have. David reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card. Here's my number. Call me if you need anything, even if it's just to talk about everything that happened today. Maya took the card and looked at it. Sterling Industries was printed in bold letters with David's name and title underneath. She realized she was holding a piece of the business empire that her grandmother had helped make possible through her sacrifice. I'll call you tonight after I talk to Zoe, Maya promised. They walked out of Benny's place together, both feeling like their lives had changed forever in the span of a few hours. David got into his Mercedes, which was running perfectly thanks to Maya's repair, and Maya climbed into her Honda, which was still making the same concerning noises it had been making that morning. As Maya drove toward the diner, she thought about how different her day had turned out from what she had expected. She had started the morning worried about being late for work, and ended up discovering a family history she never knew existed. She had stopped to help a stranger, and found out he was actually her family. The diner was busy when Maya arrived, and Tony was indeed angry about her absence. But when she explained that she had a genuine family emergency, he agreed to let her work the evening shift to make up for the lost time. Just don't let it happen again, Tony warned. I've got a business to run, and I need people I can count on. Maya promised it wouldn't happen again, but even as she said it, she wondered if that was true. Her life felt like it was about to change in ways she couldn't even imagine yet. The rest of her shift passed slowly. Maya served coffee and burgers to truck drivers and travelers, but her mind kept drifting back to her conversation with David. Every time she looked at the ring on her finger, she thought about her grandmother Ruth and the love story that had shaped her family's destiny. At 3:00, Maya left the diner and drove home to her small apartment. Zoe was already there doing homework at the kitchen table under Mrs. Patterson's watchful eye. Mama! Zoe jumped up and hugged Maya tightly. How was work today? Did you fix any interesting cars? Maya hugged her daughter back, marveling at how smart and curious this little girl was. I had a very unusual day, sweetheart. I met someone who might be part of our family. Zoe's eyes got wide with excitement. Really? Do we have family we didn't know about? It looks that way, Maya said, sitting down at the table with Zoe. Remember how I always told you that your great-grandmother Ruth had some secrets about her past? The mysterious grandfather story, Zoe nodded. You said maybe someday we'd find out more about him. Well, today I met his grandson, a man named David who has the same eyes as great-grandmother in her old photographs. Zoe was fascinated by the story Maya told her, asking questions about the ring, the photographs, and David's grandfather who had loved their great-grandmother so many years ago. So David is like my cousin? Zoe asked. Something like that, Maya said. He wants to meet you if that's okay with you. Can he help me with my engineering projects? Zoe asked, always practical. Maya laughed. He might be able to. He runs a technology company that works on solving problems with cars and other machines. That sounds cool, Zoe said. When is he coming over? In about an hour, Maya said. But Zoe, I want you to know that meeting David might mean some changes in our lives. Good changes, I think, but changes nonetheless. Zoe looked at her mother. Seriously. Mama, you always tell me that good things happen to people who help others. You helped David today, and he turned out to be family. Maybe this is one of those good things. Maya was amazed by her daughter's wisdom. At 8 years old, Zoe already understood concepts that some adults struggled with. When David arrived at 4 he brought a small gift for Zoe, a beginner's engineering kit with gears, pulleys, and simple machines. Zoe was delighted and immediately started building a small crane while Maya and David talked. She's incredible, David said, watching Zoe work. Look how quickly she figured out how those gears work together. She gets that from her great-great-grandfather, Maya said, smiling. The engineering mind seems to run in the family. Over the next few weeks, David became a regular visitor to Maya and Zoe's home. He helped Zoe with her engineering projects, taught her about business and technology, and slowly became the uncle figure she had never had. Maya started consulting for Sterling Industries on weekends, reviewing car problems, and suggesting solutions. Her practical knowledge proved invaluable to David's team of engineers, who were brilliant with computers but sometimes missed simple mechanical solutions. 6 months later, Maya made the decision to leave Henderson's auto shop and join Sterling Industries as a full partner. Mr. Henderson was sad to see her go, but he understood that this was an opportunity she couldn't pass up. You taught me a lot about cars, Maya told him, but you also taught me about treating people right. I'll never forget that. David helped Maya set up her own automotive diagnostic division within Sterling Industries. They developed new tools and techniques that made car repairs faster and more affordable for everyday people. Maya's insight into what real customers needed made their products successful in ways David's previous ventures never had been. Zoe thrived in her new environment, spending afternoons at Sterling Industries learning about engineering and business. David set up a college fund for her and made sure she had access to the best educational opportunities available. On the first anniversary of the day Maya stopped to help David on Highway 85, they held a celebration at the Sterling family home. Maya walked through the same rooms where her grandmother Ruth had worked all those years ago, but now she walked as an owner, not an employee. The most special moment came when Maya found an old photograph in David's grandfather's desk. It showed Ruth and Thomas together, both wearing rings that matched the one Maya still wore every day. On the back in Ruth's handwriting were the words, "True love finds a way, even across generations." Maya showed the photograph to Zoe, who was now 9 years old and even more determined to become an engineer than ever. Great-great-grandmother was right, Zoe said. Love did find a way. It brought us David. That night Maya called her grandmother's spirit in her prayers and thanked her for the sacrifice she had made so many years ago. Ruth's difficult choice had eventually led to opportunities and family connections that Maya could never have imagined. The broken car that had brought Maya and David together became a symbol in their family of how sometimes the best things in life come from helping others when they need it most. Maya's simple act of kindness had not only fixed David's car, but had also fixed a family that had been separated for over 60 years. Years later, when Zoe graduated from MIT with a degree in civil engineering, she wore her great-great-grandmother's ring and carried on the family tradition of helping others and never giving up on love, no matter how impossible it might seem.